One thing that people remembered about Ellen White were her prayers. Not very many of her prayers were recorded. Occasionally when she was speaking, giving a sermon, and she would pray at the end of the sermon, the secretary would take down the prayer. But we do not have very many of her prayers actually recorded. But the people that remembered them, they were very moved by Ellen White's prayers. H.M.S. Richards Sr., the founder of the Voice of Prophecy, was a young man in 1909. He was a teenager in 1909 when Ellen White came to Boulder, Colorado. It was her last trip across the United States, and so she stopped at Boulder, and they were having a meeting there, and he would recall that it was in a building. He thought it had 8 sides and had an iron roof. I think it was the Chautauqua building actually, but he doesn't call it that. Anyway, she spoke, and he said that when she spoke, of course this was without any microphone, so she's having to project her voice. He said that she could project her voice, everyone could hear her, and it began to rain on that iron roof. And you can imagine all the noise when the rain is coming down. He said she went into a real preaching voice and she just talked right above the rain. Well, when she got through, of course, she was quite tired, and her son stepped up to where his mother was still speaking and said, I think maybe you've got a long trip yet. Maybe we should stop now. And she said, no, I want to pray for the people first. Now, Harold was 14 or 15 at the time, Harold Richards. He said he was seated on the front row. He'd come early, wanted to make certain he could hear Ellen White, be close to Ellen White. His father had met Ellen White, and he wanted to listen to her very well, intently. And he said when she knelt down by the pulpit to begin to pray, it wasn't our Father, it was my Father. And he said she began to talk as if she were having a conversation with God. He said he'd never heard a prayer like it. He said before long, out in the congregation, you could hear people beginning to weep and cry. She wasn't using any dramatics. She was just talking to God about this congregation. And he said that when she preached, he said it was like a grandmother, just an elderly grandmother giving a warm sermon. But he said when she prayed, God honored her, and many people's lives were changed during that prayer. He said he'd never, in fact, he recalled that as she was praying, he said, I was afraid to open my eyes. He said, I was certain that if I opened my eyes, I would see God right there next to her. It was that intimate as she poured out her heart on behalf of that congregation. He said as long as he lived, he would never forget that prayer that he heard as a teenager there in Boulder, Colorado.